You've said roughly 14,000 migrants have been arrested in the first month of this administration.
Welcome to PS Weekly, the sound of the New York City school system. I'm Jasmyn Centeno.
And I'm Jojo Fofana. And today, we're thinking about immigration.
The Trump administration did away with a longstanding policy that largely kept ICE from making arrests in schools.
So then they come to school thinking that maybe they could be safe here, but that's not something that we are able to guarantee anymore.
Well, not just immigration. We're thinking more about the children of immigrants.
Ooh, why?
Because more of us are applying to college.
And we're having a hard time being able to afford it.
And for those with at least one undocumented parent, FAFSA applications are down 44%.
Today, Jojo and I will discuss the process of financial aid for first-generation students who are children of immigrant and undocumented parents, and how they're navigating the college application process. And when I say they, I actually mean we. Jojo, how's your experience been with FAFSA?
All right, well, my mom is from Sierra Leone, and she wasn't a citizen until not too long ago. So we had a lot to explain to FAFSA on why I couldn't fill out certain things. And I felt like you had to fill out all these bells and whistles to even think about even affording college. You have to prove a lot, such as, example, what school your parents went to, that might not be able to be found under search, right? Because, like, my mom's from Africa, so that's just, it's not, you're not finding it, right? How much money you expected to make, or, like, your social security, if they're even a legal citizen. And that was, like, definitely complicated for my mom to answer.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, proving that I'm even a low-income first-generation college student. Specifically when applying documents for my dad, he didn't even have experience sharing his 1040 or his W-2 documents. And it kind of made him feel like he was being interrogated. As high school seniors ourselves, we understand the college application process can be incredibly stressful. We write multiple essays and draft personal statements, but there are other thoughts that linger within the minds of most future college students, and that's financial aid.
For New York State residents specifically, there are financial aid resources provided such as TAP, the Tuition Assistance Program that helps New York State students pay for college.
And on the federal side, there's FAFSA. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid.
There's a recent survey of 600 first-generation FAFSA applicants from Study.com. The survey showed that FAFSA applications have not only delayed their college decisions, but in some cases have derailed their educational plans altogether. Almost half of first-generation students have trouble filling out their FAFSA. 86% of those surveyed said they considered other options due to FAFSA uncertainties, such as additional scholarships or alternative loans. Some tried to get even more work hours toward their college expenses, and some considered delaying their enrollment. So this is one of the many struggles we've had. But let's hear another perspective on it. From your friend, right?
Mm-hmm. My best friend of 5 years has experienced firsthand complications when it comes to applying for FAFSA. So previously, you were already mentioning, She wanted to share her own story under the alias Gabby. I know that you said your mom was born in Trinidad. So while she was there, did she ever receive higher education in high school or through college?
She did seek a higher education in high school, and she did go to college, but she never got to finish.
What would you say the hardest aspect is about being a first-generation student?
Financial aid.
And why is that?
Because it's a harder process. I mean, not because I'm a first-generation student, but because she's undocumented. I mean, because she went to school in Trinidad, it's not the same as the American process. So she doesn't really know what Common App and all those stuff are, but I also don't share those stuff with her. It's made the financial aid process hard. It was very stressful. There was nights where I needed to ask my mom for a lot of information, and she didn't have it, or she didn't know what it was. Some things I had to... The process was very long, longer than it should have been because she's undocumented, but yeah.
When you say she was unfamiliar with some documents, would you mind referring to which ones those were?
For IRS, when you're signing in, it asks you for a certain type of taxes, but you have to be a citizen to have them, or pay taxes. My mom doesn't pay taxes. Well, she just started, but she didn't pay taxes. You need a ID, a state ID. she didn't have that. Well, she still doesn't. And just stuff that you need to be a citizen in order to have those type of documents. At first, I thought I would have to use my aunt's taxes, because my mom did put me on my aunt's taxes, thinking that I would need it in the future. But thankfully, on FAFSA, I was able to just put that my mom doesn't have her social security number, so it made it really easy. But it makes me question, like, have I put a target on my mom because of this? But also, like, would I be able to afford school? So even though it took like a very long process because she didn't have like her socials, I did get the full thing, so I'm very thankful.
So, how did you feel when you realized you couldn't enter your mom's documents?
I felt like it was time to move on. I didn't want to dwell on it because there wasn't much I could do, and it's a scary time where telling your situation can backfire on you, because hearing that Trump was starting to deport people who didn't have their papers, it was kind of scary, and I wanted to make sure that my mom was safe, and I didn't know if it was more important that I get my education than not knowing where my mom would be.
Can you describe to me the moment when you initially realized that your mom being undocumented would have been an issue for you growing up?
I didn't really realize until high school, but my mom had told me she didn't have her papers when I was in elementary, because I think she figured out herself that I wouldn't be able to do a lot of stuff, or like some things would be limited.
And that experience itself, how did that make you feel?
I felt okay.
Girl, now no you didn't. Why are you lying? Why are you lying?
Because they don't even know that.
They don't even know who you are, baby.
Okay,
Like,
but I don't want to put that out there.
no, literally, you're acting like it's very chill.
I've been living with it for a good 9 years now.
But you've been living with it, but like when you initially found out, like of course like the feeling was gonna like dim down after a while, but like how did you feel when like you initially knew?
You know what? Pass me the mic.
What emotions did you feel at the moment?
I felt sad. At the moment, I felt sad. I didn't really understand like what it would mean for the future, but I cried, and my mom didn't even understand why I was crying. I didn't understand why I was crying, but
How did your mom not understand why you were crying if like she had just told you that she was undocumented?
because my mom is Trinidadian and she's a very tough lady, so like crying isn't really a thing in our family. So whenever I cry, my mom doesn't really understand why I cry.
Did you talk to anyone about it?
No.
You didn't reference like a friend, a counselor?
No, this is the first time I'm ever talking about my mom's situation to anyone.
Did you talk to your mother about it?
No, my mom doesn't really talk about it, nor does she want to.
That sounds really hard, especially when you take into account that the FAFSA Simplification Act passed in 2020. This act was supposed to help people like Gabby and minimize the amount of questions being asked on a FAFSA form. But more importantly, it was supposed to increase the accessibility by helping all kids get better access to financial aid, no matter what the circumstances are. So the fact that she had to go through that is terrifying.
But even if things got better with the Simplification Act, the application process was still a mess, with tons of technical glitches and errors. And now, with all the budget cuts, the number of staff at the Federal Student Aid Office has been decimated. On the other hand, completed application numbers seem to be up from last year, but we won't know for sure until June.
Stories like Gabby are commonplace for first-gen students, and thankfully, there are people who can help. School counselors. Next, after a break, a counselor in downtown Manhattan will shed some light on the inner workings of this problem.
We hope you enjoy listening to PS Weekly as much as we enjoy making it. I'm Amy Zimmer with Chalkbeat New York. We spend a lot of time planning each episode, setting up and conducting interviews, cutting the tape, writing scripts. It's a long process and totally worth it. But here's the thing. We don't have a bunch of money or millions of followers. So we're counting on you, loyal listener, to help us get the word out. Take a few seconds and send this link wherever you're listening to 3 friends so they too can enjoy PS Weekly. Thanks for your support.
Inspiration comes from all kinds of places.
A late-night chat with a friend.
Or a letter from a pen pal.
A single comment can shape us.
Whether that's from a mentor or a parent.
Or your favorite author.
On this season of On Our Minds, we are exploring Who Inspires Us.
From PBS News Student Reporting Labs.
On Our Minds is a podcast produced by teens for teens.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. We're your hosts, Jojo
And Jasmyn. When we were last with you, we discussed my friend Gabby, who struggled with her FAFSA application. She's like many other students of undocumented parents who either don't have enough required information or are scared of mentioning their parents' documentation status.
I interviewed Danielle Insel. She's a college counselor at a University Neighborhood High School in Manhattan, Lower East Side. I wanted to get her take on the financial aid process for first-gen students with undocumented parents. So you're a counselor, as you know.
Yes.
Right? How long have you been doing counseling for?
This would be my 12th year.
I was curious about how she helps first-gen students once they walk into her office.
I first just make sure that they know I'm a safe, trusted individual, and I know trust is built over time, but I'm not gonna disclose anything to anyone. Letting them know I'm here to guide them through the process, and recognizing from their end that they may not have as much exposure to this process as their peers, but definitely exposure to as many things as possible. So taking them on college trips, having them bringing admissions representatives here, letting them know that they're not alone. There are so many first generation college students, not just in our school, not just in our state, but in our country. They're, and reminding them that I'll be with them through the whole process. And also, I also would say talking to the families. I think it's important to make that connection, talking to their parents, and explaining the best I can, and if English is not their first language, finding an interpreter, that's really important.
Language barrier.
Yeah, language barrier is definitely a big one. We have to pay attention to the news. There's a lot going on with immigration and education cuts and federal cuts, and how does that impact students? There's just a lot, so I think a lot goes into it.
Right. So what do you do for students whose FAFSAs take more time due to unique circumstances, undocumented? Some files might be there, because as we know, FAFSA can be at times very unforgiving with how that works. Do you have any thoughts and ideas?
I do. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of persistence. Persistence is key, and I think I'm not going to show outward frustration. I show them okay, this doesn't work. All right, then we're going to contact FAFSA. We're going to call. We're going to use the chat. We're going to contact the college. We're just going to keep communicating and keep doing what we need to do. I did have a very frustrating experience today with a student whose parents are undocumented. There's this thing, if your parents are living together, they're undocumented, and they're working, FAFSA does not work to submit the parental information that is required. You have to submit both parents' information. FAFSA thought that you could, and I had to go back and forth with them today and be we've tried every single thing, it doesn't work, and then we have to do the paper FAFSA, which I don't know how many months that takes to process, but paper.
Wow.
And that only happens to students whose parents are both undocumented, living together, and unmarried.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would certainly have some economic divide, would it not?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
And like, I don't shy around. Like, we acknowledge it all, you know? We acknowledge all the systems at play and how unfair it is and inequitable. So like for today, like we submitted a paper FAFSA. I don't know how long that's going to process. It may not process by the time the student graduates from high school, and then it's summer, right? So like I may not be around to ensure that student's FAFSA processes and they get the financial aid they need to actually attend college their first semester. So it absolutely.
That's painful.
Yeah, it is.
Really
Yeah.
Wow. As you might have already known, there was a FAFSA Simplification Act, right? Have you felt any changes? Do you feel like your students have been better supported, or was there no change?
Okay, so if we get past the technical issues that have definitely surmounted, I do think it is easier. It is easier. It's easier for for the most part, whose parents are undocumented. It's easier. It used to be a different process for them. That part is actually simplified a little bit. The problem is that the people who work at FAFSA, which aren't many anymore, are not, I feel like, 100% up to date with how to navigate each challenge that arises. For example, what I just said earlier about like students whose parents are undocumented, live together but are not married. The people at FAFSA that I spoke to this morning kept telling me like delete the account or use a different browser. And it's like we've tried the browsers, we've tried different Wi-Fis. It's not that. It's that those who have a particular immigration status just are discriminated against, whether intentionally or not.
As a counselor, it's been for 12 years, right? So do you feel like how we handle first-gen students, has it gotten better?
Yeah, I definitely think it's gotten better. I think you hear a lot more colleges talking about them and figuring out ways to provide support for them. So they're not just like these hidden people anymore. They're definitely out in the forefront. And I think that they feel more empowered than ever to like advocate for themselves and make themselves known. But from when I started, oh my gosh, like a world's difference. Yeah. Like you can even tell by, like for example, like New York State has a DREAM Act that is now accessible to undocumented students or students who may not qualify for as much aid. And so for our first gen students, like that's huge. And that didn't exist when I started.
As you know, we are in a different presidency now.
Yes.
Do you have hope for the future? You know, with the news and everything, I guess you can't really ignore it, can you?
Can't ignore it, but I think I'll always remain hopeful for the future because I think things come and go in waves. I think that those of us who are from a place of privilege or power, like to make sure that we use our voices, you know, because I think it could be a little scary right now for certain groups of people to speak up. So to make sure that we're on the front lines and like speaking out and speaking up. And yeah, like, I mean, we're not going anywhere, right? And I always say, like, I know it sounds so cheesy, but like, I have so much faith and hope in the young people, you know, like in you and like your peers and people your age. Like, you don't like, I don't know how to say this like without cursing or whatever, but like, you don't just like take shit, you know what I mean? Like, you actually are like, no, that's not okay. No, you cannot talk to me that way. No, like I demand respect. You know, when I enter a space, like I'm going to have a seat at that table. Like I'm bringing a chair, you know? So there's where my hope lies.
As first-generation students in the midst of a deportation crisis, it's more important than ever to check in. Counselors like Danielle do their best to campaign for support, but it starts with you. Our stories won't tell themselves, and it's our duty to make sure that our needs are not buried under misunderstanding and documents.
Hey, Speaking of stories, whatever did happen to Gabby?
Oh, she's doing great. She just got into all her SUNYs and her target California schools, which was the goal. She's really excited about it.
Well, the final deadline for FAFSA is June 30th.
You've been listening to PS Weekly.
PS Weekly is a collaboration between the Bell and Chalkbeat, made possible by the generous support from the Pinkerton Foundation, the Summerfield Foundation, and FJC.
Producers for this episode were me, Jasmyn Centeno,
and me, Jojo Fofana, with reporting help from Chalkbeat reporter Michael Elson Rooney.
Our executive producer for the show is Ave Carrillo, and executive editors were Amy Zimmer and Taylor McGraw.
Additional production and reporting support was provided by Mira Gordon, Sabrina Duquesne, and our friends at Chalkbeat. Our engagement editor is Carolina Hidalgo.
Music is from Blue Dot Sessions, and the jingle you heard at the beginning of this episode was created by Erica Huang.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.